Okay, so here we are, and I'm very pleased to be here with my co-panelists who I'm going to introduce to you. Today's panel is about how EO can be used to inform the public about current events of global impact. It's also about how new user communities can be reached through Earth observation and how awareness can be raised amongst those communities about the solutions that Earth observation can offer. So obviously, Earth observation has more than gradually entered into the public awareness, stretching all the way back from, the original blue dot. But since then, we've had several key changes to awareness on a grand scale of the potential of Earth observation and what it can do. We had Google Earth 2005, and then jumping a bit more to the recent events, there have been a number of cases in which Earth observation has made the news and has been the trigger for discussions and awareness on a scale that had never been seen before, particularly with the most recent events since February 24th. But I'll save that for the panel discussion. And I'd like to add that this panel session links back to another discussion which was held in the context of the E-Shape project. Some of you are aware of that, in which we were asking very similar questions. That is, how can EO be used to raise awareness amongst the public, and how can we really bridge this gap between awareness of EO in general and uptake amongst new user communities? And we've spent a lot of today listening to fascinating insights from the other panels around policy and regulation, around capacity building, and of course the R&D results coming from the sectoral work here in the FIRE project. So we'll be looking at how all of that ties together, and I'd like to now introduce the panelists who are sitting to the right of me. I have joining me Remco Timmermans, who is a social media specialist for space. Hi, Remco. I have with me Sebastian Marcu, who is Managing Director of Design and Data. Hi, Sebastian. And contrary to what the agenda said up until very recently, it was with some regret that Jonathan Tyrone from Bloomberg informed us that he was unable to attend the session remotely today due to what is probably COVID. So he can't be with us, but thankfully we found, and we're very lucky to have with us a replacement in the form of Annalisa Donati from Eurisi. She's the Secretary General of Eurisi. Welcome, Annalisa, and thank you for taking the floor, the empty seat that was left by Jonathan. Before we get into the questions, I would like to touch on a few, let's say, housework elements here involving you, the audience. So first of all, you might have seen that there is an illustrator working in the background of this conference and producing these marvelous graphics of a kind of a summary, a visual summary of our discussion. So I invite you to pay attention to that, and I think it's coming on screen behind me, and it comes on screen when we are able to put it there. So do look out for that. Secondly, about questions from the audience, well, you've already heard the spiel, but I am obliged to remind you again that all questions must be submitted via the Slido interface. You will have the details there on screen there. Please make use of that platform. I'm keeping an eye on all those questions, and we will tackle them during this discussion. Then one final point is that I would like to open the first Slido question to you, the audience, so that you can think about it and write your answers in, and we will come back to them at a certain moment in time. The question I would like to put to you is, which innovative uses of EO for awareness raising would you like to see more of? Okay, you will hear from our panel today a lot of different examples, but you probably already have some ideas. So please take the time to think about that question and provide your answers, and I'll be looking out for those. So, welcome, guys. Thank you for being here with me. Remco, you are, by definition, an EO social media specialist probably one of the very few EO social media specialists in the field, except of course, our EO evangelists, of which you are indeed a part. So Remco is the EO evangelist for Urban. What are the main ways in which you have seen EO used to raise awareness amongst the general public?
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for having me on this panel, and well, hello to everyone online. Yeah, first of all, to answer your question, I don't see enough examples. Let's be very clear. That's been the message throughout the day today, is that awareness is still insufficient. We don't see enough stories, examples of Earth observation in the mainline press and on social media. Having said that, of course, there are very good examples of the use of Earth observation in stories. Earth observation, in fact, is used to bring many stories of society. And I've highlighted a few. And of course, my specialization, as you correctly said, is the use of social media. So I'll be using a few examples of that. The first example that is rarely mentioned in any formal Earth observation event is Google Maps. Google Maps, Google Earth is the first place for most people to go to if they are looking for information about their life, about their house, about shops, about finding routes. Google Earth is one of the most important Earth observation platforms in the world from a user perspective, but also from a storytelling perspective. It's also one of the most accessible. We talked about accessibility of EO data. Well, again, Google Earth is that platform that everybody uses without thinking, again, without what I was saying this morning, spending 4 years at the Earth Observation University to understand how to use the data. Google Earth is a brilliant example, and we all know that. Now, if you look at social media, there's quite a few social media influencers. It's not just me doing social media for Earth observation. There's quite a few people out there. Some do it for hobby, but they have many followers. Some do it professionally. I'll just highlight a few. Pierre Marcu, I'm sure here in the EO community, he's very well known as a visualizer. Ivana Metsoy, but also official accounts for DG Defi, for Copernicus. A few stories that you were saying, that you were mentioning before, that are highlighted by EO imagery over the last times. We may all remember, I'm sure we do, the Ever Given situation in the Suez Canal last year. Although this wasn't an Earth observation story as such, it was kind of used as sort of a new space race among satellite data providers. I don't know if you saw in the news, but there were all these satellite data providers kind of showcasing their capabilities by zooming in on this ship in the Suez Canal in more and more detail, using optical, using radar, basically as a showcase for their products more than anything else. But it was a great way to see how Earth observation, space data can be used in real time to highlight certain stories. And then, of course, you highlighted it, and actually on the groundstation.space platform where I write about Earth observation, and we have a special about the use of satellite data in the situation in Ukraine, where at the moment, Earth observation is being a critical element in documenting possible war crimes for prosecution at the International Criminal Court. So there are examples, but to come back to my previous statement, there's still not enough.
Sorry. Remco, thank you. I must say that is a very strong and resonant message. There are not enough examples to actually, stimulate, to inspire, to generate new markets. We're going to be talking more about how to develop the market as such in the next panel. But I also take a note from what you've just described. Of course, Ever Given was on the front pages, and that was something which generated a lot of press and media coverage. And as you said, it was used as a showcase for capabilities. And as you also said, more recently, and it's impossible to purge from one's memory the feeling of seeing that long rows of Russian convoys heading towards Kiev, which of course was also shared widely. Maxar and Planet images were used to spread that message. So this is now coming to a point which I would like to highlight a subtlety in the focus of this panel, which is that I mean, Remco's talking about some of those cases were really about the public, informing the media, informing the general public, and showcasing EO as a tool to tell a story. That's one modality. There's another very important modality, which is subtly related, and that is accessing users who don't even know they could be users of EO. And we heard earlier on that in some cases, you might not even realize that the information you were using was generated in the first case by a satellite. And I want to take that as a springboard to go to a question to Sebastian. Sebastian, your company, Design and Data, develops innovative communication campaigns on science, on space, and on technology. Can you give us your view on the role of Earth observation in this context? Is
it live? Okay. Yeah, so we as Design Data, part of our DNA is about playing between technology and media, and we often faced with challenges how to make Earth observation, let's say, more present, more alive. And so we've been involved in a few projects recently, and where I think it's interesting how to get Earth observation more present, because what I often see, and you also see, I mean, we have the examples of the brochures. Things are printed, but then they're out of date the minute they are distributed. And there's something that we've recently been involved with is something called story maps. This is also part of the ArcGIS system, but we've been using a platform called Shorthand, which has allowed us to connect different forms of content and to create interactive, immersive stories. And we've only scratched the surface of it. What's fascinating about this tool as a platform is that you can link it to live data, so that let's say the story is always current and does not go out of date. And so whenever you visit this site, and what's nice about the Shorthand platform is that it doesn't require any adaptation to any current content management systems. But if organizations, companies want to tell stories with Earth observation data, they can basically integrate it into a website and make it look very unique, interactive, without heavy coding for that. This is one aspect. The other aspect, which was fascinating to see, and we were involved in another project where we had data visualizations to be produced of the ozone hole on a weekly basis. And this fascinating because we were basically working with the EO experts hand in hand to take the NetCDF data and convert it into visual data that we could use to create then the 3D view of the globe, and update it on a weekly basis, so that you can get an impression how the actual what does the ozone hole look like today on a weekly basis. What was nice to see, it even made basically the homepage of Nature, I think, magazine. It was that to see this as the image of the week. Last year it was. So it's this is another way of using Earth observation data and keeping basically the users engaged by making sure that it's always current, basically what people are saying. The third aspect, which I find nice to investigate more and more, and we're starting, is that the tools are now ready to allow for annual reports to be published, but not as print products anymore, but as interactive, so that you can basically read an executive summary, so for policymakers, for example, and have the data presented in an interactive fashion, but also have it live and fed in directly into the tool. So it's so that we're basically getting rid of the printed annual report, and we're making it all digital and making it constantly current, which, yeah, it's a fascinating evolution of where things could go with Earth observation. I think personally what I think is definitely lacking more is really the direct hand-in-hand interaction with Earth observation experts and companies like ours, where we'd be excited about the potential of what else could we do to visualize the data in different forms that may have not been attempted before. And one thing that I personally like very much is using creatives that have no experience at all of the topic, no experience of the domain, and seeing them basically bring in fresh ideas and seeing them slowly develop into Earth observation experts through the process. And that's quite fascinating to see. So it's another form of extending the reach of the communication through other channels, I would say.
Okay, well, thank you, Sebastian. So what I'm reading from that, I mean, is really this this notion of the story map being a way of fusing a content story that you could have told in another way with the satellite imagery, which does two things. It makes the story more powerful because you're getting these huge overviews, sometimes global scale. You talked about an interactive system in which the data is always current. And actually, it makes the story more accessible, but it also showcases the capabilities of the satellite data as well at the same time. So achieve these two goals at the same time. And I think that's very interesting. And I want to highlight that at the E-Shape panel on communication and awareness raising that I was at 2 years ago, the originator of the story map itself, the gentleman from Marcu, was present, and he told us how that came to be. But of course, these things are now, in a way, somehow commoditizing. You've mentioned there are other platforms that can achieve the same thing. And I think that's well worth looking into. And I also take your point about the need for Earth observation experts to work more closely with communication companies, with companies doing outreach, in order to actually get to the point where REMCO can say there is a sufficient number of examples of Earth observation used to raise awareness. Okay, so I'm now going to turn to Annalisa and ask you to tell us a bit more about the role of EURISI, because I think this is central in a way to the second of the pillars of this discussion.
Thank you very much, Dimitrios. And first of all, thank you for having me here, which, as you maybe, yes, I will just come a little bit closer, which, as you mentioned, was a little bit unexpected, but still, I mean, I hope very interesting for the audience here. I will gladly say something a little bit about EURISI, because apparently, indeed, there is also the need to raise awareness on what we do. Because it was a pity for me earlier to hear that the largest European database of success stories about the use of satellite application was not mentioned. So, I mean, EURISI, on our website, we hold this huge database that since 2011, it's collecting success stories. Those stories are stories about what the users are already benefiting from in terms of not only quantitative, which means not only economic benefits stemming from the use of those applications, but also qualitative benefits. So the optimization of internal processes rather than, for instance, the better management of resources, of time. So I would invite everybody to visit our website. And before going to other different tools that we actually use and to raise awareness and to disseminate the value of Earth observation as well as other application, indeed, I will just say a couple of words about EURISI. So EURISI was established in 1989 by the vision of Hubert Curien, who was the then Minister of Education and Science of France. And we have among our funding members the European Space Agency, as well as of a bunch of like-minded agencies that at the time wanted to really investigate and exploit the potential of a satellite-based application. Today, we gather 20 among space agencies across Europe and way beyond. So we have also space agencies that are not necessarily within the European territory, but that they still work together to increase the awareness of the satellite-based application services. How we do that, we've been mandated by our members indeed to basically bridge the gap between space and society. And how we do that? We do it through three main pillars of activities. The first one being the facilitator. Indeed, we do create awareness raising campaign, which means that we work together with the user. We try to understand their needs. We try to understand the challenges of different sectors. So we work on thematic areas rather than with specific development agencies, or really like users communities that are willing to get to know a little bit more, or that are willing, for instance, to modernize their own way of doing things. So we do work, for instance, with cities. We mentioned municipalities. Eurisi is leading one of the European Commission initiative within the marketplace, which is about geospatial cities. And I believe that this is very interesting because there it's where we do have the actual user. What we do, we synthesize their needs. So we do try to understand the different paths, and we do bring them together in order to make sure that this is very well understood from you guys, from the people that are working in the Earth observation market. And yet again, we do work as a matchmaker in the sense that when we work, we do create, for instance, platform where this can be exchanged. So needs and opportunities and offer can actually be there. And there is like an interesting and lively interaction among those different parts of the same value chain. And this increased the uptake in the sense that once you have the user on the spotlight and they can tell with their own live voice about the benefit of this kind of application, this is not something filtered. So the next users doesn't feel like, okay, this is the next expert, the next technician coming to me and telling me like how amazing is this technology. No, this is done by someone like another municipalities rather than another association of farmers, for instance. We've been working right now at the European Maritime Days with the maritime community. I have here one of the latest publications. This is also what we do, which is collecting users' stories about the maritime sector. So how currently operational satellite-based services are helping them in their own daily work. And again, what is also like our privileged position is that Eurisi can bring back the feedback to the space agencies, to the institutions that are there. So basically, we do also support the policy development, and we do try to smooth the path for integration. Very last point that I want to mention here before, of course, like keeping on going with the discussion, it's about also new ways of engaging with the users. As we said, like one of the challenges, for instance, we realized in our work is language, as has been mentioned, like to not necessarily use like technical language to explain the solution and the benefit. So we developed, for instance, video testimonials that can be easily used. There is on our website a project called Copernicus and Me. So this is all about how different institutions all across Europe are using Earth observation data for their own purposes. And we do have, for instance, the cultural heritage governmental office in the island of Rhodes in Greece. And they're explaining us how, through land monitoring, for instance, they can make a punctual maintenance of cultural heritage, which is key for the island of Rhodes. Or, for instance, we do have an amazing video on Port La Nouvelle, which is like a portual city in France, and how they're using Earth observation data to monitor the quality of the water and to do the renovation works for the port. So this is like completely within the maritime spatial planning activities that we are called to do today, which needs to be sustainable and needs to increase the resilience of the activities themselves. Or we do have another amazing platform, and this also, I think I can come back to what Sebastian was just mentioning, and about how to make those information, let's say, permanently available for the users. So, and to engage the general public. We developed a 3D platform and a virtual reality tool, which really is an immersive experience to showcase a little bit different services. So you can go there and you see, like, of course, a cartoonized version of Earth, where you can go and check in the smart cities. And for instance, you see immediately which is the problem, which is the challenge. Like, okay, leaking of water pipes in the city. So the city needs to actually make sure that this is addressed. How do they do them? And you check and you see the service itself. So, which is another easy way to make sure that the message is sent to the users. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Annalisa. So, I mean, clearly there is a lot in there to unpack, but definitely going in the direction of addressing some of the concerns raised, I mean, in earlier. And of course, highlighting again for us this need for, I mean, there's no point telling a story on behalf of a user. A rich story map is judged by the quality of the story. And if that story is coming from a user, using that same community's language, it's going to be that much more impactful. So thank you for all of those insights. Now, we're going to circle back around on many of them, I think, as we come face to face now with the input from our audience here. And I would like to request that the results of the Q&A firstly be placed on the background here so that you can see them. So we've got a number of questions here. I think we'll just have to sort of cherry pick through them. Do you see possible to have policymakers interact easily with EO data for tailored purposes, for trend analysis and indicators? I mean, if you, yeah, Remco, you can take this one.
Yeah, if I can pick this up, and I see this in several of the questions here. What are the most impactful ways to tell geospatial stories? Is it possible to have policymakers interact with data? Yes, and this is in the art of storytelling, if you like. This is in the art of how do you communicate. And it all starts with exactly these questions, with what is it that policymakers in this particular example are looking for? Someone asked about the most impactful way. Well, what would make a difference for you as a user of this data? And how can I tailor my story such that it impacts you, so that you have an emotional connection? Storytelling is all about emotional connections between what's in the story and your own personal experience, your own life, if you like, or your own business. I mean, you highlighted the fact that many of us addressed the general public. Well, there is no such thing as the general public. As we heard in the previous session, there is no such thing as a user community. We have many user communities that all have their own specific requirements and their own special issues they're dealing with. And the stories that we tell and the tools that we bring and the services that we develop should really be tailored to that. So that is really where stories, but also services and solutions start, is with what is it exactly that connects to these communities.
Thanks, Remco. Just a couple of things, going to compress them into one bullet point and then just move on. We had I think this was actually a response to the question I asked you, saying what would you like to see more of? And that is demonstration portals, including storylines and showcasing graspable EO products and solutions through videos, GIFs, newsletters, social media posts, etc. So quite a cluster of suggestions there, but definitely a focus on the portals. And then there's a second one, very similar, regularly updated portals powered by EO, but having info that is meant for public consumption, simple graphs, stats, etc. And I think this comes back to both, well, there's a few threads that it pulls together. It talks about the idea that it's maybe not about the image, which I think was a comment we had from the previous sessions. We're not talking about image, we're talking maybe just about a statistic, and a statistic over a certain area, statistic over time. So simple graphs, simple stats, etc. It also talks about this idea of a graspable EO product, so something you can interact with. And you gave the example, Sebastian, of your ozone monitoring tool, which clearly does a lot in terms of actually making it tangible, what we are talking about. Then we have a question, which is, what are the most impactful ways to tell these geospatial stories? Maybe that can go to one of you.
Well, maybe I pick up also on some of the what Remco said. Personally, what I find fascinating, I mean, we've been involved in many types of projects before, where either it's been just a video, or it's been just an infographic, or some data visualization. The magic happens when you combine all these elements, and story maps is one way how to achieve that. But even going beyond, let's say, the digital, so I would coin the term transmedia storytelling. So where it's a combination of online, mobile, print, and we've been basically seeing where we can use different types of media to achieve, let's say, a certain reach. And story maps is a basis for that, because there you can use video, you can use illustrations, you can use direct links to the data to compute that live on the platform. So there's a lot of potential there. But what I also find interesting to explore is to see how we could customize it. So depending on what type of visitor to that site, we can then provide certain information that is, let's say, more appealing to that particular type of user, whether it's a policymaker, whether it's an experienced user, whether it's someone from the general public, because you're not going to be able to tell using the same content, give them basically the same story, but you would need to adapt it to each type of user. But again, a platform like that could help you achieve that through some sort of tokenized mechanism, for example.
Okay, thanks. Anyone wish to add something there? Or we can move on. So I realized that the list we were looking at before was actually, people are confused. There's the Q&A and then there's the poll, but I think there was some mixing of the two. So we received questions as a response to our poll, and we've answered some of those questions, which is good. We've also seen some of your responses to the question of what you'd like to see more of, and we talked about portals and so on. I believe someone also wanted to know why they couldn't ask a question live in the room. That's so that our users in online can also have the same platform, the same level of attention. So do use Slido to send your Q via the Q&A tab. So if you could put the Q&A on now, we do have some more questions there. Okay, actually, let's hold on for that. Let's go back to our panel for a general question to be asked to all of you. Now, we heard in the morning about this EO adoption paradox, which I thought was a very interesting conceptual hook for this discussion. So the potential of EO, although it is demonstrated, is not being uptaken at the rate that we would like. So how can the potential of EO be better communicated to new user communities? And I'll ask you in turn. Maybe we can start with Annalisa.
Thank you very much. So So first of all, just to add maybe one word on what was said before, I mean, I think that we should be able to use more the wow effect, which is brought by space, in order to indeed build those stories, and this was at the basis, for instance, of the platform I was mentioning before, the Space Service Hub, because we wanted to make sure that this creates engagement. About new users communities, I mean, we do work a lot, indeed, first of all, trying to have an understanding what those new users communities want and what they need, and why they should turn into Earth observation solution rather than what they're currently using to address their challenges or their daily workflows, for instance. And to engage them, I believe that what is really powerful is to be able to showcase how they could address the challenges that they are basically expressing, and which kind of benefits they can get from this. And again, I mentioned few, it's not necessarily only something that needs to be quantified in economical terms. And this creates, I believe, once there is understanding, there is engagement. And it's the word of mouth within the community itself that also creates a lot of participation. And to me also, what was really interesting was to find out in the recent survey that ERSC is, basically sending out to the EO community, and was about asking to the company which is the challenge that you face the most, and it was market acceptance of the services themselves. And when you're asking the companies, how do you believe that this can be overcome? I mean, and the answer is about, more info sessions, more trainings, more awareness raising. And how do you do that? This is still the point. But I believe that's indeed one way of trying to do this, because this is also mirrored from the users' communities, that they want to know more and to understand more. It's avoiding again some technicism and going directly to basically how to use the service, provide them with actionable information, and make sure that they do understand the value of the solution for their own sector and work.
Thanks. Sebastian, would you, sorry. Yes.
Yeah, shall I start? Sorry, I clicked my light on too quickly, sorry. Yeah, there's a few things I'd like to say, also in line with what Annalisa is saying, and in line with what we were saying earlier. We have to listen to the user communities, because in the eyes of most people outside of this room, Earth observation, satellite, space data is extremely boring. Nobody is interested in the technology that is behind space data, and even the word data makes most people fall asleep. What we need to do is, when user communities do not pick up the opportunities that there are, the benefits that we all believe that there are, it means that the opportunities are not good enough. Is that the benefits are not good enough, in the sense that it may not be easy enough to pick up these benefits. It is too technical, it is too difficult, it is boring. We need to change our language, exactly as what you said. We need to adjust our language to the language that people in society are using. We need to stop talking about satellites and data and ground stations and all the stuff that is needed to get data to the ground, and start talking the language of society. And then you'll see that users will pick it up. If we build our services around their requirements instead of around our technology, they will pick things up.
Maybe one thing that I would add to that, mirroring that. So we've been involved in some projects where we've been trying to reach out to different types of user communities, trying to make them excited, interested in space topics or data from space, and Earth observation included. And what we've seen is the discussions then come round to, well, the benefits need to somehow outweigh the cost of getting involved in there. I mean, you have to put someone aside that needs to start dealing with that. There's a cost, manpower cost. There's travel costs. So there's all kinds of costs that are basically churning up for organizations that are not involved with Earth observation. And often enough, for them, it's like, let's not get involved in this hassle. And I think one thing that I've experienced working also at ESA many years, there's been all these kind of great initiatives to invigorate the industry to come and work with ESA. And of course, then there's this portal that was opened or this brochure made, and then everyone was kind of, okay, why is nobody coming to talk to us? And I feel it's a similar situation here. And I think we need to, in combination, of course, with all this wonderful world of transmedia storytelling and stories, there's also still the element of personal connection of the Earth industry, Earth observation industry, going out to these actual people. And taking away the fear. I mean, it's really a lot of winning them over. And if there's a way, of course, to make these tools simpler so that it's easier to access them, by all means. But I think all in all, human contact is still a huge factor in getting these user communities involved.
Wow, good old-fashioned human contact. Who would have thought? Who would have thought we'd be talking about that in this day and age, at this particular time? Well, thanks for those reflections. And I think it is very difficult. I mean, we were talking previously with Annalisa about how EuroZ does its work through the members, the space offices and space agencies. And of course, we all know that ESA is very careful about picking a user community and developing user engagement and user requirement development activities, and gradually having a momentum of several years of projects and activities in order to develop services on, for example, oil and gas. There's activity for insurance. I mean, this is the way to do it. Even so, it's very difficult to get people to change their stripes, change their ways, no? And I think it's worth reflecting on the fact that if you show someone a beautiful satellite image or an edited processed map that shows them information that's crucial to their sector, like let's say it's insurance and let's say it's about loss estimations or something like that, they might still say, well, I can't use that. I have a system that's, stacked on like 10 stacks high of technology that has nothing to do with what you're showing me. Don't know what to do with it. I can't put it in my system. So I think it's very important what you said, Annalisa, about establishing a dialogue with these users. We're very interested to hear more about how you do that and what are the best practices there. But in the interest of time, I am going to come back to our Q&A for a second. I think we already answered a question about how we can raise awareness amongst user communities, but someone in our audience, a person called Laurent, asked whether we can provide examples of story maps so that that person could take a look at them. And I think that is a very valid request. So maybe since we didn't have slides, there's nothing to distribute afterwards, we can commit to posting on our social accounts, which if you go to the FIRE social, which you should be able to easily find through our website, we've posted links to all our panelists with their accounts linked. So we can share examples. I think all of us can share something, from our discussion. In any case, welcome to examine, further material that we would share related to this discussion. So that's very good. And then there was a question about, again, we've answered all of these questions about how EO is used to communicate on public events of global impact and all of that kind of thing. Well, I think we started a little bit late, but in the interest of recalibrating our schedule, I would like to call this session to an end, and I would like to thank once again my panelists, Remco, Annalisa, and Sebastian. Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. And especially Annalisa, of course, for stepping in at the last second.